All right. Well, oh, would you mind grabbing those, Al, while
And
they
no
come
problem. I'll
in?
take care of it.
Okay,
Yep.
appreciate it. Yeah, I think I'll set it to net ID next time. We'll see how that works. Um, anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. It's I suppose, our first webinar for the new academic year for the fall. So Al and I have been super busy over the summer with lots and lots of updates of plugins and blocks and the new theme and new admin websites and decommissioning other multi-site servers. So we just want to kind of share some of the stuff. We won't bore you with all the sort of behind the curtain stuff that we've been doing, but maybe the things that we thought would be of interest and use to y'all in terms of like blocks and plugins, new things that you can take advantage of building out your websites. So we'll start off with a few updates, just generally, and then we'll talk a little bit about the new theme. I think Al kind of talked a little bit about that at one of our prior webinars last year. He kind of showed a cool progression from way back to 2013 to the 20, and talked a little bit about that. But that was pretty early on in the development of the new theme. So we've actually got it. It's living in the wild now. It's actually running on the new admin site. So we'll show that. Al can talk a little bit more about the new theme. Then we wanted to demo. We've got a whole range of new blocks or blocks with new features. So we're going to just spend about a half hour at least or so kind of demoing some of the new blocks and patterns and plugins that we've been working on. And then if there's time, so we always put QA at the end, but please just, if you have questions as we go along, definitely just raise your hand, unmute your mic, and please feel invited to ask those questions. All right. So I think most of you know us. Some of you might be new. I see a few newer names, but I'm Mark Millard. I'm the web service developer within CALS IT, and I work with Al. Al, you introduce
Hello.
yourself.
Yes, I'm the web operations manager for CALS IT.
All right. And typically the best way to contact either of us or us as a team is to use the web support at cals.wisc. So that just ensures that goes into our ticket system, and then both of us see it. So if one of us is out or busy with something, the other can jump in and get a quicker response. So with that, let's just talk a little bit. We'll do some news and updates. And Al, feel free to jump in anywhere on here.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to jump in or on the CALS V4 theme status and take over. We'll just kind of, this is all very casual, everybody, right? This is how it usually goes. But with the new theme, just some quick highlights here, as we kind of talked about, I think in a previous one. This is the upcoming new theme, which is based on effectively a new architecture that, well, AID is trying to accomplish a number of things, including improved speed, performance, accessibility, as well as a number of things when it comes to what the editors can do and do more and have more available options to change things. And all of those things are coming along nicely. We have a sort of moved forward enough with how far the theme is to start to implement it in a few places. So for those who maybe haven't yet seen it already, or I know a number of you in the room actually been helping to build it, which is amazing and wonderful. I'll put a link to such as the new administrative website there. And there's a bunch of things that are going on here, in terms of helping to make this do what it can do. And we'll kind of go over a bunch of these highlights here. But overall, the nice thing is that this has gotten to a place where it's reasonably mature enough to start to implement. We have a few departments that are starting to work on sort of new versions of their sites behind the scenes, which is great. And we're going to continue to take feedback and any sort of working with them information we can to make further improvements to make this work better for everybody. So for those that are interested or curious about potentially looking at updating your site to use the new theme, I'd say, as Mark pointed out, reach out to us using something like that web support address is a wonderful way to get that conversation started. The theme is technically available to admins to activate at your leisure, but I know a lot of folks will really prefer to have the sort of like option to kind of build in another space, especially if they feel like they really want to adjust content drastically, right? in terms of this sort of new look. So definitely something to reach out to us though about. I think it'll take some time for I think everybody to sort of start to move over to using something like this, and we're going to be preparing new versions of things like the administrative sites as those kind of go through the project pipeline. But it is available for departments to start to take advantage of.
Great, yeah. Yeah, so I think on the design development, we'll kind of talked about the new blocks patterns, and we'll definitely be demoing that. And and Al talked about the new CALS admin website launch, which was a big project over the summer, which basically combined 7 or 8 of our different admin websites into one. So there's one nice user experience, hopefully for all your all the CALS admin information. Couple things we'll just mention as well. Yeah, we worked to decommission the CALS multi-site. So many of you may have not known, but maybe the short of it is we used to have 2 multi-sites, the current web hosting one that most of sites ran on, but there were 20 or 30 sites that ran on this other CALS server. So some of you knew this, like if you would log into one server, you would only see a select number of sites under your My Site. So you'd have to go to this other place to see the rest. Well, we've basically moved all of those over, so they all live on web hosting CALS multi-site now. So it'll be a nicer experience for those that had sites on both. Now you'll see all of your sites under your My Sites list. So in terms of your experience, that's the big win there. In terms of like our time and experience, it's just gonna really help us rather than having to manage basically do everything twice for updates and securities, and we won't have to do that anymore. We're still working on some cleanup. We have all the sites moved off, but we're still working on the final, basically shutting it off. We haven't quite got there yet, but we'll be working on those tasks over the next month to 6 to 8 weeks with Do It. So that was pretty exciting though. So just to mention too, the plugin, the next couple bullets are kind of all together. The plugin audit and migration. So with some of the other work that kind of got put on hold, but that continues, basically moving our plugin updates and management into a new process, just to kind of streamline things. This is also in conjunction with a couple of mostly one major update to PHP 8, which is technically a pretty big leap. And so making sure that all of the plugins actually run under PHP 8. Some of them, I think we mentioned this last time, some plugins, and we'll be reaching out to some of you that may have certain plugins, but some plugins may have been abandoned over time by their developer, in which case they won't run. We have a short list. It's not very big, but we so far have a short list of those that we've determined don't run under PHP 8. They give errors, and that the project has been abandoned essentially. So we'll be reaching out to folks. In some cases, those we've already reached out to they weren't even using the plugin anymore, so that was easy. We were able to just pull it out. If you do have a plugin that meets these 2 requirements, won't run on PHP 8 and has been abandoned, we can help you find. In almost all cases, we have another plugin that is being updated and will likely serve the need that you have with that plugin. So just keep an eye on that from emails from us. So know that that's going on. There's also a good sized WordPress 6.1 update coming in. I think it's November 1st is when they release it. That's not when it'll show up on our production. That there's usually a lag time where we can kind of vet it and do all the testing, but probably over the winter sometime, these 2 pretty big updates will be happening. So, and then just a plug for our next webinar. We're looking at Thursday, December 8th, from 2 to 3. So maybe jot that down now, but don't worry if you forget. We'll have more posts, and we'll get that in eCals, and we'll have a newsletter about that to remind everybody. So Al, did you have any other things or anything I forgot to mention? about?
I think you covered it really well. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to the good stuff here. So yeah, Al and I just wanted to demo a set of the new plugins and blocks and things that we've been working on. So Al, did you want to go first, or do you want me to just keep going?
Either one works. I guess, yeah, whenever we're ready, because we kind of looked at, I think 5 each of us will demo. So we could sort of switch off whoever's sharing screen and kind of go through that demo. But yeah, I'm happy to jump in anytime. So let's see. I know a number of these, a lot of you that may have worked on things like this admin website project, you're going to recognize. I can jump in on a few of these if you'd like, Mark, and then pass back to you, or what sounds good to you?
That sounds good. Maybe I'll just, since I'm already sharing, I'll just go through kind of this top Excellent. Chunk.
Yeah.
And then we can switch over and you can demo the rest. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So the first one I wanted to show was a tabs block, which we had a lot of requests for. And so this is essentially what it looks like on I've already inserted it in. It's kind of what it looks on the front end. I'm going to open up the page editor here. And there's two blocks that kind of go together, a tabs and an accordion block, which we also have, and I'll show. Now the accordion block, we so far have a couple different style variants in terms of what it'll look like, and we plan to add. So right now the tabs block only has this style variant, but we're planning to add, and that goes with kind of a number of the blocks. We're planning to add some additional style variants, so you can basically with one click change kind of basically what it looks like, what that display, that chunk of page looks like. So I'm just gonna expand my browser here. Hopefully that's big enough for everyone to see. I always forget to zoom in here. Maybe that'll help a little bit. Yeah, so this is pretty much, it's laid out with a tab group. Let's actually get to it here. There we go. It was hidden in the group. So you basically insert, just like any other block, you can expand your block inserter and just start typing. If you type tab, you'll see the tab group there. And then that'll just insert it into the page. And then from there, you can just start adding tabs. So each tab is basically a container. And inside that tab container, you can basically put any other block. So in this case, I've just put like a header, a paragraph, and a list. But you can pretty much literally insert any other type of block that you would want for that contact or for that content. And maybe I have one example in the HR page, for example. I'll just show you one example of a live where they're using it. I think to pretty good effect on their contact page, where they've got a couple of tabs, and then inside those tabs, so the content they have is actually the directory block, which Al's going to talk about later. And then they just selected specific folks that they wanted to show up in those tabs. So that kind of shows you really can insert almost any contact. And this is an example of using a dynamic block that's pulling in that data, which I'll talk about. But I think that's a pretty kind of interesting use of that tabbed content. In this case, even that little thing always pops down. There we go. Yeah, in this case, I've just got 3 tabs with a header, some paragraphs, and some resource links. All right. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Just pop your hand up or type in the chat box, or maybe
Sarah's saying too that they're thinking they want to change how those tabs work, actually,
okay.
which is fine. The idea is it should work for how you want it to work. So
exactly.
Yeah, I know I tried reaching out to you guys a little bit ago, but it was like right. I mean, it was like right when things went live, so y'all were swamped, but it was like right when Vanessa was leaving too. And so, yeah, it's actually something that they're looking to change, just because I think
Cool.
it's so few people at the top versus if it was like a huge handful of us. I do like how they work, but yeah, I guess Sills would like to see changes among
Sure.
others.
That sounds good.
Yep, sounds good.
That so we can
yeah,
circle back around on that.
We'll definitely do that.
I just also thought that emoji was pretty perfect for my interjection there.
Yeah, that's
awesome. All right. So the next one I wanted to show, actually, the other thing I also wanted to show too was, as you, a lot of you might remember, although some are new. So the construction of these can be through individual blocks, or we also remember we have patterns, which are basically like collections of blocks, things, again, patterns that Al and I are building out. We're still working on them, or Al did a lot of kind of nice reorganization recently. Because as we get more and more, we're finding we want to make sure they're organized nicely for everyone. But the beauty is, so you could sit and build this whole thing, but block by block, by inserting the tab and then adding the new tab, and then inside the tab, add the header. Takes a little time. But in this case, we have some patterns for this already built. So here's an example of the resource list tab. And so all you have to do, you click once over the preview and it'll just insert that whole thing. I just inserted one at the bottom of the page. So inserted all those blocks with some placeholder content for you. And then so all you would need to start doing is typing in the content that you would want. And remember, the nice thing about a pattern, once you've inserted it onto your page, is completely editable. So if you don't need a third tab, well, you can come in here and just remove that third tab. Or say you don't want list items, you can just remove those and insert whatever you want. So yeah, patterns are super helpful for kind of speeding up your page building process. All right. So the next one I want to show is the accordion. And just for the sake of time, again, we have a pattern for an accordion, and I'm just going to use that because I get lazy. And so I just have notes under the resource lists, and it's right here at the top. And you can see the titles under each of the previews. So in this, we have 3 right now, but all I have to do, again, is click on the preview. And wherever my cursor was, now it's just inserted the pattern, which is basically 4 accordions already built out for me with stuff in them. So then I can just start. But if I just hit update on that real quick, and then we'll reload this page, I'll just show you. It'll appear here in a minute. And there we go. And now we've got our nice accordions. And one thing we did add that the old that it didn't have before was an expand and collapse all. So you can there's an option to show or hide that, but that's something nice. If you want to actually see everything in all of the accordions, you can do that now. So a couple of things I wanted to show though. If I click on the accordion here. So right now we do have 2 style variants. And that's kind of one of the newer things that we want to show. So you can basically with one click. So right now it's on the extra space style variant, which again kind of gives you this. It gives a little extra space. It's mostly a white background with kind of these whiter circular buttons. However, there is a default. We're calling it the default style variant. So if I click that and I hit update and update the page, then you'll see it actually will transform those just with one click, which is nice. And they'll have blue backgrounds, and they'll be a little bit more condensed together, as you can see. And so that's how you can change. And a lot of the blocks already have different style variants. And that is something in terms of the polish we're adding to blocks and themes, we're adding more style variants. So, and that's just another plug I want to put out. If you have something a block currently doesn't do, or a block that doesn't exist that you'd like to have, please, again, reach out to us, because we love that feedback, and that gives us, helps us prioritize how to spend our time and what to build next. So, anyway, that is the accordion I wanted to show. What else we got next here? Oh yeah, so an auto sidebar block we built. So this came so the quick background of this. So the old theme, basically, a lot of you know might know, had a sidebar built into the theme itself. That was a common element. That is something that's not in the new theme. It's not built into the theme. But what we did to add that flexibility is we created a sidebar block. So this is sort of version 1, and we're still working on it. We're going to add a couple style variants. We're going to add some options for how much that you can want to show in terms of like an expanded or condensed version. So this is sort of the first version. But what it does, and I've got kind of already have it built out here, and kind of notice actually a bug that I'll have to make an issue for here. But anyway, what it does is it any child pages, it will just automatically create, if you insert this block into a page that has children, it'll automatically add those as links on that sidebar. So you don't have to go and add those manually, like using a page list block or something. So kind of helps speed things up like that if you have a page where you want that sidebar. So in this example, the research page has these children pages. And so all I had to do, in order to get that sort of side-by-side look right, I had to first create a column. I used a 75-25 column block container. And then I just put all of my content in the left side column. And then I just dropped the automatic subpage block in there, and then it just automatically sees any children pages and it drops them and it displays them. So that's how that works. You get that. What's next? Okay, the nav menu block. So this is actually a WordPress block that was introduced to click on the front view. So it'll create now Al did a great job like adding style, because the default was just kind of there. So he's done a great job styling it, really integrating it with our new theme. But it basically allows you to create different navigation, sort of sub navigation. So you'll still have on your sites, you'll have the ability to create a site nav using the menu tool, but this will now allow folks to add a kind of a sub navigation page. And what's nice about this block is it'll reference, let's say you have just one navigation that you want to show on multiple pages. Well, you can create that navigation and it'll store those, and then you can just reference the same one. So then if you ever change it, it'll update everywhere you're using that particular navigation element, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a cool feature. And you can click to add new navigation items, or you can edit them by clicking on the different nav elements. It also has, you'll notice, 2 different style variants. So this is the default. There's a transparent, which I will save and reload. So you'll watch the nav will change to more of a transparent. And then there's also the what are we calling it? Blue button background, which will make it like a nice blue nav element. So again, we're working. Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I was gonna say, we use that, if you've seen already, on the new people directory of the admin site, we use that as a way to provide a nice simple drop down, right, of selecting different offices.
Yeah, and Al's talked about the admin people page here. My network's a little slow today. So these kind of nice drop down elements there. So that, and that's basically in the navigation block in a nutshell. Again, whenever you click on a block, always make sure you'll have some menu options, but you also have a lot of these block properties over here. So you can change the justification and orientation. You change all kinds of things for any given block. Okay, last block I was going to talk about is our UW icons. And let me just insert, it didn't work up a demo for this, but so if you insert either using from the page inserter or up here in the block inserter, and it's actually right here at the top. But if you start typing icon, you'll see our UW icons block here. And I accidentally added 2. So it's inserted the page. And then at this point, all you have to do is you click browse the icon library. And you can actually, again, there's kind of a little contextual menu, or you can click browse all and it'll open up a nice big modal. So not only so there's a whole bunch of nice SVG icons in here. What's nice about SVG icons is they'll scale really nicely. You can rotate them, you can add different colors. So they're very flexible and malleable. So it comes with some of the WordPress icons, but what we did, and Al figured out the basically porting an open source project, and then we got all the UW. So UW Communications has a whole suite, 87 branded icons. They were just provided as Illustrator files or PNG. So we did the work of bringing those into this block. So now you can have all of those UW branded icons available with one click. So they're all here. If you want the flamingo, you can now just click to insert the icon that you want. But see, now here's where the SVG comes nice. So you can center the item, and then we can, you can rotate it if you would need to do that. You can change the size, right? So let's say you just wanted a big giant, and then let's change the color. Unfortunately, we don't have pink. Maybe that's something we'll have to look into. We'll just make a big red flamingo here in this case. And then if I reload the page, did I pick the right page? Yeah, and there you go. So yeah, a nice way to insert some nice icons into as graphic elements on your pages.
Yeah, and I think HR did a nice job with doing that, for example, in their section under admin as well.
Yeah, let's show a good example, right? Because it's a terrible example.
Well, flamingo's a good example. I mean, you gotta go with that.
But not a big giant flamingo. Yeah, so that's a good point. Let's show a kind of a good example. So here's a nice example of them using these icons to kind of signal what a section might be for. So yeah, this is how you might be able to use those. So with that, unless there's any questions about any of the blocks I covered, I'm going to pass it over to Al.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll share my screen if that's all right. And then kind of take from there. We'll just go over a few more. So let me know if this is appearing for folks. Hopefully it is.
I do see it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let me just go over, I'm gonna get 5 as well. I'm gonna kind of tackle hopefully semi quick here, but if anybody has any questions about these or want to know more, again, drop something in chat or feel free to reach out to us another time. So first off is the animation properties. So one of the things we started developing and figured out was how do we actually not just add some of these really specific CALS blocks, but how do we do things that are much more, I guess, broadly reaching across more of the general page layout you're going to be working with. So one of the things that's been more and more common, and for those that, for example, have seen things like, if I could type wisc.edu properly, that'd be helpful. Seen things like the wisc.edu redesign, right? You see some of these elements that sort of sweep in here as we zoom, as we scroll down, right? Great example of this. This is something that I think is a semi, common design pattern out there. And what we want to do is make sure there was a way to do that. And so that's something we've applied already. So you already noticed that sometimes there's a few elements that are sort of just part of it, especially the new theme has a few things that sort of takes care of on its own. But we wanted to give the option and certain elements for that to be applied as you see based on how your layout's going to work. And some of these things we'll actually prescribe as part of these patterns too, just from a standpoint of what seems to work really, really well or what's really popular. But just to give you an idea of how this works is what it means is that if you look at a couple of very common elements, so things like a heading block or a paragraph block or even this column, there's now an option here on the right-hand side called animation. And this is something that we've just added in. So as you look at something like this, you can, if I looked at the page normally and I just, kind of refresh the page really briefly here, you're going to see that as it reloads here for a second, there's going to be, it sort of lands here. The title sort of animated for a second, but not a whole lot else really took place. I could say, for example, this column, I'm going to have it slide in from, maybe it's sliding from the right. I know we can try a couple of things here. We'll have it delay just by a little bit. And let's have the column slide in maybe right away. And let's also make this heading slide in. Let's make it slide in from the left and maybe delay that a little bit. Likewise, we could do the same thing with this. And you can see how you could kind of go, you could kind of do too much. You want to be wary not to overdo this per se, but there's a lot of things that we could do here. And if I go ahead and update this just to see what effect does this actually have, let me go back here. I'll refresh. And then you'll notice as the page loads, these elements sort of slid into place. And these elements, all of these animations are triggered based on whether or not the thing that is set to be animated is within the viewable area. So case in point, if I came down here a little bit farther and maybe I found something else, let's say like this Experience a Sunset's title we have here. Let's go here and actually change that. So let's come in here and animate that in. I'm going to slide that in from the top. Maybe I'll just delay it a little bit here and I'll update the page. Actually, I should probably go back up and just to demo this properly. And then if I come down here, as I get this into view, right, it slid into place. So these animating properties are things we're going to continue to sort of work on and enhance. There's a number of things that we want to do, which is we want to make sure we keep animation subtle. So it's not overdoing things. It's keeping things to a nice sort of tasteful amount of animation, but not kind of, making things fly over the screen. The other thing about these animations that's really important to note, and I want to make sure people are aware of this too, which is that they are set to within the back end of the site to obey what a user's preferences are. I think from an accessibility standpoint, this is really important that we make sure that we don't override what a user prefers. So if they're on their device and they've set their assistive technologies to say, I don't want any animation, these will not animate anyway, right? So if that's something to be aware of, is that you can set an animation and the animation may be there for most users, but we want to make sure we obey and listen to what a user's preferences are. So I think that's a really notable thing to kind of be aware of, but it's a really interesting tool that you start to apply. And you've probably seen it in a few spots already. And you may have seen this in a few spots on the CALS admin site. If I go to, actually, I think if I go over to like the IT section, so you see a few of these elements sort of sliding in here. I think it can be a nice little mechanism for that. And again, you can do things just like you saw on Wish.edu, where as you scroll down the page, some of those elements sort of slide into place. These are things that we're going to continue to work on, enhance, but a nice little element there. Next thing I guess I'll show on the list real quickly here is what happens with some of these page patterns. So there's a few things we've been doing beyond just reorganizing these page patterns and adding a few new ones. We've also started to work on page pattern suggestions. So the idea is that as you actually go to a new page, especially if you go to craft new page, you're going to start to see some suggested patterns for pages. You don't have to use them, of course, but these are things to be, I think, that are really useful. So you can keep in mind that I landed on this page to start to create something new, and it gives a couple of full page patterns I can work with. So number one, for example, if you were someone that liked the page layout you may have had or had a page layout you preferred, especially from, let's say, the current 2015 CALS theme we've had for a while, there's a page pattern right there. And if you click on that, just like with any other pattern, it drops it right onto the page. And in this case, this kind of matches the look and feel you've had from that theme, which means it'll use that automatic subpages block that Mark showed and automatically build that sidebar nav, that one that's sort of been required on the 2015 theme, right? It's sort of just there. Now it's there for you by default, but you can still adjust things. You can take things and move things around. Likewise, there's a few other page patterns as well as that I think a number of you have seen already, page patterns that include things straight out of the, they're all these ones are mentioned here in the pages section. So we highlight a couple just to release that we think are more common, that are marked as more popular, but there's even more in here under the pages section of the patterns. Any one of these you could click at any one moment and drop them right onto the page, and again get all the same benefits of things being sort of pre-laid out, but you could still go back and adjust. Another thing I think that's really, really nice to mark in here, note is that and I forgot about this as well when you were showcasing the patterns, which is, don't forget, if you're looking at that little sidebar menu and thinking things are just really condensed in there, if you click that little explore button again, which is just right here next to where you select the pattern type, it gets a much easier way to see these patterns in a lot more detail because they're now kind of closer to full size, right? So something to keep in mind, but a great way to actually leverage, picking a pattern and then having something pre-laid on the screen for you. So you see like this pattern, a combination of using the icon next to some text with a call to action, right? All these sorts of things you can kind of roll into one pattern here. So that kind of, I think, covers a lot of that. We're going to start to work towards a little bit more with some of these patterns too, whereas you start to lay out certain elements. If you pick something, let's say like a list block, this is something that's not yet there, but whether it's something like a list or some of the other common blocks, there'll be other pattern suggestions right here. So you see if you pick, you could enter a list, but now you're getting suggested some down here. Or if you have a list already in play, there's going to be some ones that we can start to suggest even in these contextual columns. So you're going to get more and more sort of seeing what we can do to offer some sort of help with some of these patterns. And again, all these are optional. They're just there to kind of try to make things easier, right? Just shortcuts to kind of get some of this page building done quicker. With that, I guess I'll jump on to maybe the next one, which is the directory plugin block. So for those that have obviously seen this a while in the previous theme, the directory sort of functionality in some ways has been around for a while. And the idea being before is that it was sort of pre-compartmentalized. You couldn't really decide where you wanted your directory information to necessarily show up as well. There wasn't as many options to make it show. And so there was a big revamp we did to that directory feature. So if you're looking at any part of the dashboard, you're going to now see that there's still that directory option that you may have seen there in the past. Those elements are still there. We've added a few fields there, things like making sure you can highlight if people want to be able to show pronouns or show their appointment, things like that. Even having the taxonomy. So a lot of these things, we've continued to improve little bits here, but a lot of this is we're trying to be consistent to what we've had for a while, especially those that have had the directory going for years. All of this stuff carries forward. You don't have to redo your directory. All that information will stay together in one place. The upshot, or the new thing that I guess that's there though, is the ability to decide and display these directory pieces anywhere you want. Right now it's a block. So if I add something, let's say like the directory block, actually, let me go back in here and actually, I think I need to refresh this one here. I realized, Mark, at the last minute that I hadn't turned on the directory plugin, so I had to re-add it. Oh. And then that way I can actually show some of those things. It's kind of useful, right? But if I go in here and I can type in now directory, there we go. So the directory now, by default, is not listing anybody because I don't have anybody listed on this training site, but you'd get all these various options here on the side. To give you a little bit of idea of what that might look like, though, we can show you because we've implemented it to great effect, I think, on the new administrative site. So if you have information in your own website that you're looking to highlight people on, we're going to be working towards ways to, especially if you have folks that are coming from administration. One of the things that we have sort of on our future roadmap is going to be ways to pull in the admin set of directory people remotely. So you wouldn't have to necessarily actually re-put in Mark Rickenbach and Doug Reineman if you wanted to have them on if there was something you want to display there. But the idea being that this is information that comes through the directory information. So it's nicely organized. It's always in the same spot. But on any given page, you can decide how and when you want to show this information. So let's just actually log in here briefly and I can show you what that looks like. I need to have the, I failed to conclude the actual, what is it? The cooking magic show aspect. That's like, it's already done in the background, right? You need to do that a little bit more often. You need to remember to do that. So
the second oven, right?
The second oven. Yeah. I should have all those things ready. That'd be amazing. So yeah, so if we jump in here now and I can actually now refresh this page because I've now authenticated and you can see a little bit how this is going to work. But the idea is it's really, there's a lot of options and this is the thing that gets really daunting, I think, if you get something with a lot of people in it. But the fact that it takes advantage of the data organization you're hopefully applying to your directory now means you don't have to do a lot of extra work to get these sort of things. So In this case, I have the directory block visible here. The directory block itself on the back end, I think we're still going to work through trying to make it look more and more to what it's going to be as it displays. That's something that's kind of as it goes, is sort of coming down the pipeline here. But you can see here, I decided to display this particular group as a grid. I can decide to allow filtering. We can even demand with this checkbox of filter first experience that the user first has to interact with the filter before it displays anybody if we wanted to. We could check that box, and that's what that'll take place and do. It'll sort of say, no, you have to use these first. There's additional things where you can then highlight. If you have put in a categorization of your directory, you can highlight and click on different people here, or different groups here, and they will become a drop down here. So you can actually show that information to folks in the way that that's going to actually be listed. So actually, I should actually bring this back up on a separate tab here just to show that. But as you go through here, there's a few other things. You can even set manual conditions to show and hide different dropdowns based on what the user otherwise picks. So there's a whole series of things here where you can get really, really, really complicated with things, but it's very powerful. The way this kind of looks and kind of functions here, if you're looking for like, well, why would that be useful? If you come in here and, for example, select something like the people directory here, I say I want to select the information technology group. Now, because I'm under IT, I also now get this subgroup. I can now break people down further. And it doesn't make sense for us to show this separate sub drop down for everybody else, because I don't think there's probably someone for cybersecurity underneath HR, right? But you can see the examples of how this all comes together. So that's the directory block. Directory block is kind of huge, but if there's questions people have about it, or if you're looking to implement it on your site and need some help, again, just reach out to us. We're happy to help with that. I'll show one other thing here before we get into the last one, and I want to make sure I'm conscientious of time. The document block, kind of similar to that. We also apply that similarly here. Again, you can see this, the common theme here is there was a lot of work put into this administrative site, and a lot of those features are built into such a way that they're modular. It means that anybody can use them that's on the CALS WordPress platform, which means that you don't have to have just been a part of this admin project to get sort of the perks of these new modules, these new features. So if you have a whole series of things like documents, in this case, we're trying to organize things that are policies, standards, guidelines, procedures, all into one space. And this is going to be to the benefit of the college as well from this standpoint. But if you have your own set of things that are really more document based and want to provide some level of organization or listing of them, the document block does the same thing. So once we enable this for you, you'll have a set of documents that you can manage. If you were on the admin panel, you have a section for documents right here on the left. Similarly, there's types, tags, and groups that you can organize things by. And once you enter documents in, which can be stored either locally on Box, or if you want to reference things like the campus policy library, there's set links and available for that to be all worked in by default. And then on any given page you want to display them, there's a specific block, just like the directory block, to display out that experience. The nice thing about that being a block is that then you could still precede this information with like some sort of message that says, hey, what is this stuff about, right? Or have this after a series of other pieces of content. So all of that's there and has its own experience to it, but has a nice way of organizing that document information. So I'm going to jump onto the last thing real quick, because it's kind of a big one. And then we'll see if there's any questions. I don't know if there's anyone's been in chat yet. So
nothing in the chat as of yet.
Okay. No problem. So yeah, so the last thing is definitely, I think, could be pretty impactful, depending on if you feel like you have some information and things that fall into this category. We really don't have a lot of sites that have, I would say, take a strong advantage of needing NetID, partly because I think there's been this huge friction point to doing so, by the way. Having this ability to take a particular page and say, you can't get to this page unless you have an NID at least, right? So it's not viewable to the general public. You have to be at least on WSTU to some degree. That is something that has not been easy to apply before, and we've built something that makes that possible for someone like anyone who has a website to actually apply. So how that works is that on any given page, there's a little option in the bottom sidebar that lets you select the option to say limit page to users with NetID. By default, it's always none. It's just a public page like any other page would be. So there's no drastic change for things like that. However, if you select something like that, and it'll take care of making sure the page itself gets the settings automatically. And then what were to happen here is if I go to the page and I'm logged in, I can see it, right? I'm logged in, I'm an admin or I'm an editor. I should be able to see it anyway. The difference, though, is that if you were to come here as someone who's not logged in and you try to get to that page, right, you need NetID. You have to have NetID to get through. That's really important, but it makes it nice and protected for information that you just want to make sure is only visible to folks that are on campus. The other thing you can do, though, that's even a little bit more powerful than that, you can start to specify who has a net ID that you want to be able to see this. Now, the process for doing this is there's a little bit more involved. It's this third option here. When you select NetID users, by default, it's only going to show you folks that have already been added as a user to the site. So what you have to do in order to do this is you have to make sure you at least add these users to your site by NetID. So you would come in here, and this validates that they have a NetID. It makes sure that they added to the user correctly, and it gets them added in. I can sit here and say, I really want to make sure that Mark can get to this information. So I'm going to say he's got NetID access, and I would put in his NetID and hit add user. I won't because he's already there. But if I hit add user, he's now on the site. And then at that point, I will see him in this list that I can pick from and add to the site. And the nice thing then is it's not only now protected by NetID, but you have to have NetID and you have to be Mark to get to it, right? So these are kind of some nice things. There's still, I think, some additional things we're going to be working towards, right? I think there's going to be an interest from folks that have, let's say, a programmatic protected list, a list that's maybe developed and put together by just saying, I want all people within CALS. That's something that we're going to get to. We still don't have that available yet, but that'll be probably something that's coming down the road eventually, because I think that'll just be a common thing people will want. But I think that's about it, really. Is there anything else questions wise people have? Otherwise, we'll jump on to some of the last slides, I suppose. It's like, I think we threw too much out there. That's one of the problems. There's a lot. We realized there was a lot to go through on this list, so we sort of just rambled through a whole bunch of stuff.
We're talking very fast.
Yeah.
I always
do that. We'll replay this later. I'll put on 0.5 speed or something.
There you go.
I guess with that, we can jump on to maybe a couple of things that are kind of in the upcoming list and then come back around. I don't know if you wanted me to share. Oh, you got it shared already. Perfect.
There you go. Yeah. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just,
some of these? Sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about a few of them. So the modal block, that's for, we're anticipating that being something that we have a few interested parties already. The idea being is that you might want to have a button or link of some kind on your site that when you click it, it then brings up something on top of the user's view, right? So a modal window is what we kind of sometimes call them internally here, but just sort of kind of a, not a pop-up per se, but sort of in that same vein, right? Something that you want them to catch their attention and you interact with. Same thing is similarly going to be like a sidebar. We're going to have a couple different modes for it. So you can have something slide in on the side. I think one of the common uses for this that we're starting to look at is what if you wanted a nice call to action for users to reach out to your department, your group, whatever, and you want a nice contact form, but you don't want that contact form to take up all this space. You want them to have to click a button and then the contact form sort of slides in right onto the page, and then they can fill it out and it just goes away. That's something that we're anticipating being a common potential use for that. Video cover block is one that I think may be a little more self-explanatory for those that have seen things like the Johns Hopkins University websites. Even WIS.edu had it for a short while. I still have to figure out why they may be working through new implementation of it, but they had video on there for a while. But the Johns Hopkins University site had like a video background running, and it's sort of a B-roll style video that runs silently in the background and is there to sort of provide a little bit more visual interest. And I think the Johns Hopkins one is interesting. The only downside to it, I think, is that sometimes it's too much motion. It's really fast moving.
Yeah.
So I think the difficulty about this sort of process is we're anticipating hopefully having some sample video that people can use. That's good for, sort of centers around campus and the college. But you would have the opportunity to put something else in there. It's something that we're trying to make sure is an available element for people to apply. And you could have it just like this. You could be the background of something, just like this covered, like this hero image space there at the top there is, but maybe something that's animated or something that's based on video. So that's something we're going to be working towards as well. So that's kind of in the works. We have an animated block group that's actually being tested right now. So that's going to be one that's similarly in that same space. It's a sort of a background element, but it's interactive. It's something that's it's often built programmatically. So we have one that looks and resembles, for example, molecular models or resembles sort of biological cell division. And it's all mathematically drawn and interacts with your cursor, but it's a nice sort of interactive element if you're trying to draw attention or feature something in particular to a page, but that could be something that sort of sits in the background of some content. So that's something that's coming as well. Let's see, last couple we have, I think there's just some more patterns we're working towards. and definitely some additional features and things to those existing blocks we showed. So otherwise, yeah, I think that pretty much is it. I don't know if there's others that you're thinking, Mark, that maybe I forgot, but
I think yeah, no, I think I covered it well. Shay had a good question, and Shay, let me know if I'm misunderstanding, but so is they just want a research lab, their own site, like whatever.cals.wisc, is that? So if that's the case, yeah, they can, if they come to our webhosting.cals.wisc.edu site, and they can click the request a new site button right there and just fill out that form that loads, and then that'll go into our queue, and we can work with them on getting the the URL that they would request and things like that, and getting approval from the administration and stuff like that. But yeah, just they can fill out this form and we can help start that process with them.
Like Julius, this is, will there be any way for us to check the analytics of our pages on the admin site? Ooh, good question. We are tracking the analytics out of the admin site. So that data is being collected. I think that's one of the things that would be nice to probably do is probably generate or set up, excuse me, sorry, some individual reports, just so that if you wanted to know how, just the CALS global side of things, for example, is doing on that site, you could see that versus, of course, maybe all the visits. So one of the things that we'll do is, and maybe it would be helpful, Julie, is we can at least set you up with some view access already to at least that property, as they call it, right, on Google Analytics, and you could see kind of what that access is. I can at least reflect and tell you that when we've looked at so far, because we've been looking at the analytics to compare with the admin site versus what sort of all the separate spaces that those were congregated into were like, I think we've seen at least around a 30 to 40% increase in traffic overall, compared to all the other ones cumulative before. So definitely something that's really positive to see people a lot of taking advantage of that and finding this information.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else have any other questions?
I think lastly, I would just add on there too that, as with all this stuff, I think a lot of this is we're with the format of this sort of thing, we want to make sure that we can highlight the new things that are available to you, because they're often kind of invisible, and they're not always super apparent that we've added them and that sort of thing. This is been a good platform for that, but it's also something where we want to make sure that this is, being a useful, mechanism to see this sort of stuff and learn about this sort of thing, and maybe to ask questions. So if there's anything that all of you would like to see or hear or be able to do in some of these sort of things that might be more useful, let us know. Again, this follow-up question address is a good way to do so. Would you want to do like a workshop, right? Would you want to just demo more specifically doing X or Y, or having someone bring in an example of, I need to solve this exact problem. Let's do that in real time, right? Solve the actual problem on the real site in real time. Those are things we could consider doing depending what folks are open to. So, oh, and I see Shay, another one in chat. So email Mark, let's do about some glitches on the mobile app viewing. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I'm definitely, I'm looking into that. So yeah, Shay, I'll get back in touch. We kind of got super busy with some other stuff, but I will definitely finish looking at that ticket. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yep, and we'll tend to do, I think, especially with this, the current set of features that you got to see today. I would say just for general, information, we tend to update a lot of these different components on a semi-daily basis, sometimes at least, daily, if not sometimes several times a day. So yeah, there's updates coming all the time. So we'll absolutely be seeing some changes there and make further improvements. So excellent. Well, I see we're almost at time here. So if there's any other questions, feel free to drop in chat, or again, get in contact with us after the fact, and happy to look at those sort of things and make sure they're taken care of. So
any last burning questions from anyone before we decide to adjourn here? All right, well, I think with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And I think we will go ahead and call it. But so I want to thank everyone for joining us. And just a reminder, probably within the next week or so, I'll get the recording up on YouTube and we'll send that out, send the link out in a follow-up communication. But again, mark your calendars for December 8th from 2 to 3, but we'll also be sending out reminders. But anyway, have a great day and thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.